Welcome, everyone. My name is Zachary Menzer. I'm the Associate Director of the Upper School here at Wildwood.
And I'm Laurie Strauss. I'm the Assistant Head of School for Program K-12 and the Director of the Upper School.
And we're really excited to share a little bit more about the Upper School with you today. And we are going to highlight a few students and teachers to give you a sense of what the Upper School looks like on a daily basis.
Before we get started talking about particular students, we're actually going to talk to you about something that Zach and I have done a lot of thinking about. What is the purpose of education?
And if you ask 100 people this question, you're most likely to get 100 different responses. Here's a quote that we found from Eleanor Roosevelt dating back to the 1930s, in which she said, "This question agitates scholars, teachers, statesmen, every group, in fact, of thoughtful men and women." And this is from Good Citizenship, The Purpose of Education.
So if you ask a bunch of different teachers or administrators here on campus to answer this question, you would find that their responses come under three different categories. You would hear a lot about readiness to participate in a democratic society. You would also hear about readiness for college and readiness for the workforce and for life. All three are equally important. And we feel here at Wildwood that we do all three well.
Yeah, and that's something that Laurie and I think a lot about on a daily basis whenever we are looking at the Upper School program and continuing its evolution. We keep those three things in mind and we take those very seriously. So this is a sample student schedule from a 9th grade student. This is 2 days worth of a student schedule, and we wanted to show it to you for a variety of reasons.
So this is the first of three students that we'll be showing you throughout this presentation. And the reason we've chosen three different students is because we want to show you and demonstrate the different opportunities that are available to students here on campus. Some students come into high school wanting to explore a variety of subjects, and they have the opportunity to do that. Other students come in with a particular passion that they want to follow very exclusively, and they also have the opportunity to do that.
One thing you will notice with this particular 9th grade student, and with all 9th grade students, is that there's two classes that they all have in common. The first is conceptual physics, which all our 9th graders take to get prepared for their career in science at Wildwood. And the other is humanities, which is a combination of language arts and history. One of the great things about having humanities as a common place where all 9th graders meet is that we make a really conscious effort to continue to develop organizational skills that match the increased rigor in the upper school.
You'll notice that this particular student is taking Spanish 2 and geometry. Those are both ability-leveled courses for our 9th grade students and for all students in the upper school. We actually do a placement metric that allows us to evaluate where a student should be placed in Spanish and math. And we have 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders that place in various places. Our math program, you'll see some 9th graders in geometry, in algebra 2. You'll also see them in pre-calculus.
So one particular thing that we want to mention with this student's schedule is a class called the Law, Individuals, and Society, which is an elective in the upper school, and it's actually one of 24 different electives that students can choose from. This was this student's particular first choice.
They came into the school with a passion for social justice and wanting to follow that and study that. So they chose the Law, Individuals, and Society in their 9th grade year. In their 10th grade year, they may choose from Government and Politics or Women's and Studies or Philosophy and Ethics. They have a lot of places to go from this course, but chose this as their area of interest and the foundation for their elective study.
This particular course is really fascinating because it really relies on actual legal documents to teach students about the law and its impact on individuals and society.
A second project that we do in this class is where the student picks a legal issue that is of interest to them, and they research it in class with the guidance of the teacher, Scott Johnson, and then they prepare a presentation for the class on that particular subject, and then they have to be willing and ready to answer questions from the class about that presentation. What we love about it is that it gives students the ability to go in depth on something that is of interest to them, but it also exposes the entire class to a wide variety of legal issues and problems.
And it's not just some loose configuration that you can study whatever you want. The teacher is intentionally modeling through the use of contract law at the start of the year how to study a particular issue, and students are going to model that. In particular, looking at actual documents or arguing both sides of a case, they're going to be using that when they get into their legal research project. It's really hard to talk about the law individual society without bringing up the teacher, Scott Johnson. He is a jack of all trades when it comes to the teaching profession. In fact, he teaches 5 different classes here at Wildwood that range from the more science-oriented classes like advanced physics or advanced topics in STEM to linear algebra, which is our highest level of math class offered, pre-calculus, and of course this law individual societies class.
What's amazing about Scott is that he is still a practicing attorney, as well as having received his JD from San Diego University, as well as having a master's in physics. And he has taught at 3 other schools in the area, ranging from the Bullis Academy in Maryland to La Jolla Country Day in San Diego. He brings a wealth of experience with students, as well as his background in actually practicing law.
So what's great when it comes to this actual class is that when they're talking about rental agreements and contracts, he's bringing in actual rental agreements and contracts. We asked this 9th grade student what their experiences was with the law class, and this is what they said. Law is one of my favorite classes because of the technical nature of the subject. Recently, we compared 2 rental agreements, looking at loopholes in contracts, and dissected a clause about visitors not being allowed to stay for longer than 15 days. Our discussion revealed the important role words play in clauses like these that don't necessarily clarify if it is intended to mean consecutive days. Scott also asks us to always argue both sides of a case or issue, even if we don't agree, which really helps us understand multiple perspectives. And the other thing that I would add too, it really helps with students' use of evidence. So even though they're arguing both sides and they may not agree with it, it's still about the practice of having sufficient evidence and being able to articulate your argument in writing or in front of a class.
It's a good moment to also point out that a lot of our academic electives are 9th through 12th grade. And so we have students in the classroom who are passionate and interested or wanting to explore more, but it really is the collaboration and the working together and the getting to know of each other and of their different perspectives that allows the class to be as full and rich as it actually is.
Another student that we wanted to look at was an 11th grade student who has been at Wildwood since kindergarten. Her schedule, just as you noticed with our first 9th grade students, does have some common classes to 11th grade, and that is our Modern U.S. History, or MUSH, and our Literature, Genre, and Style class, which is both 11th grade classes.
She has also chosen to take chemistry, which is one of the sciences that is available to our 11th grade students. The only science that is required of all students is in 9th grade and is conceptual physics. After that, they get to choose which classes they would like to be in, as they all meet the requirements for a lab science. The other class that she is in is statistics. Once again, students, based upon ability, have the option of taking a variety of math classes here in the upper school, and this particular student has chosen statistics
to take in 11th grade. So in 12th grade, she can continue on into calculus, or she might decide, based on graduation requirements, that she's done with math and she wants to pursue another science class or even another elective. There's a lot of freedom to be able to do that when she gets into 12th grade. One thing that we do want to note with this particular student's schedule is her decision to take a course called Women's Studies. Women's Studies is taught by a teacher who also teaches our politics and government class, and is another, what I would consider, academic elective.
This particular student, it's also important to note, is a student who's been very interested in the visual arts and has spent a lot of time in those classes in 9th and 10th grade. She did her internship this summer in a visual arts medium, and so she decided to actually take her 11th grade year to explore and investigate more about women's studies.
And one of the first things that they do in this class is they explore the history and the origin of gender identity. And this is one of the projects that they actually do it through.
So each student gets the opportunity to write an autobiographical sketch. First, they read Willa Shallett's book titled Becoming Myself, and then they actually get to mirror her work and to write an autobiographical sketch in the first person that tells their story of when they first noticed gender and how they've experienced it over their lifetime.
It's hard to talk about women's studies without mentioning the teacher, Deb Christensen. Deb has experience as a curriculum developer. She has 30 plus years experience as a teacher, and she's also really involved in the educational community. She serves on the board of a local charter school, and she's a member of our multicultural leadership team.
Deb was one of the reasons that students flock to this class, and we're going to tell you a little bit about what one 11th grade student said of her experience.
When we asked this 11th grade student their experience with the class, here's what they had to say. I appreciate the advisory curriculum, including conversations we had around gender during my time in the upper school, and that was part of the advisory curriculum in 9th and 10th grade. To have an elective, however, where I'm surrounded by a passionate peer group who opted to study something they were passionate about is very special. Our teacher, Deb, is just as passionate as we are and is so experienced about the subject area. During our first unit, we studied how people grow up gendered and critically analyzed passages from the Bible to identify some of the earliest examples of gender stereotypes with Adam and Eve. Not many people stop to analyze Genesis 1 and 2 as they relate to gender roles.
The opportunities for this particular student to have started to learn a little bit about gender and the experience of gender in our society in 9th and 10th grade is what led her down this path. And then she has an entire group of folks and peers who are interested in heading down this road with her. I think it has been a wonderful place for her to not only feel comfortable to explore these ideas, but to grow intellectually.
And I would also say that there's a lot of experiences in the upper school, not just within the curriculum, but outside, to study areas of interest and passion of students. This particular student might also be involved in our Gender Equality Club, as well as taking this class where they discuss similar issues. Mm-hmm. The last student that we wanted to highlight was also an 11th grade student. And we wanted to identify not just the same 11th grade class that they take in literature and their genre and style and modern U.S. history, but also highlight a little bit more about this student's math and science curriculum.
So this student has been math and science passionate since she was a young elementary student, and she is in our linear algebra course, which means as an 11th grader, she's already completed Calculus 2. Additionally, she has also chosen to take chemistry, and she has for the third year in a row chosen advanced topics in STEM as her elective.
So you can already see it as an 11th grader how this student's schedule is starting to take shape in terms of the path that they want to study. One other thing that we wanted to highlight besides looking at this student's schedule is to also be able to show you or be able to identify that she is already taking a specific path around math and science, which is of her particular interest.
She is involved in our Wizard Institute, which is the Wildwood Institute for STEM Research and Development. And the really wonderful thing about Wizard is that students spend the first few weeks of the school identifying learning outcomes. That is, what do I want to learn over the course of this year? And then they investigate projects and research that will lead them to that learning. So they're not starting with a lab that they are being sort of forced to partake in and then coming out with some learning. They are deciding, what do I want to learn about, and then developing something to actually identify what it is that they wanted to learn.
So a lot of science classes in high schools tend to start with something like the scientific method, studying that first, understand what the scientific method is, and then go ahead and practice it themselves. What Wizard does is also best practice, which is planning with the end in mind. The teacher works with the students, the teachers, because there's 3 teachers who work in this class, work with the students to identify what do they want to achieve in the end, and then they plan backwards to think about how do they get students to get to that point.
So our students, and we have 22 students enrolled in Wizard, and they're working on a variety of projects, and some of them are working on multiple projects at the same time. We're going to highlight 2 here. One of the things that our students have been working on is in partnership with eNABLE. They've been working to 3D print prosthetics for children in the LA area who are in need of a hand. And one of the reasons that this is such an important project is because you can imagine that the production of a prosthetic hand is actually quite expensive. And so if we could actually collaborate and engineer something that through the 3D printer that was less expensive, it would be much more readily available to children who need them. And so they are actually working through this process of not only designing the hand, but making sure that it's workable, all of the tendons and all of the muscular movement. And then they are going to work through the process of actually how it gets distributed to those who need it. The second project we're highlighting here is in partnership with Small Lab Learning, and our students are developing games and activities for the Small Lab 3D learning space here at Wildwood, which we have set up. And so they are actually doing some testing of the games and activities that are already available through Small Labs, and then they are working in partnership with some of the designers at Small Labs to create their own game.
Like the first elective, and actually like all 3 classes that we've showed you, these are all 9th through 12th grade classes, which gives students an opportunity to work with different students in the upper school. It's hard to talk about Wizard without mentioning its founding director, Joe Wise. Joe comes to us as the founder and director of the Keck Math Science Institute. He was a founding director at the Center for Effective Learning, and he basically has his hands and fingers in so much of the science community that he brings back to Wildwood.
One of the things about Wizard that makes it really different from something that other schools are able to offer is that there really are these unique partnerships with nonprofits and organizations in the area, and the students are doing real work with them. They're not simulating the work of the real world, but they're actually engaged in real world work. So whether it be at JPL or at UCLA or working with Game Desk, our students are working in conjunction. They're not research associates. They are actually doing the research.
So we talked to one particular student, this 11th grade student, about their experience in Wizard, and here's what they said. I always enjoyed science in middle school and found it fun, especially being involved in the Future Cities project and competition. Moving into high school, the level of challenge increased significantly. Currently, I have 2 projects going on in the STEM elective. One, I'm working on deconstructing and reconstructing an actual engine in the Innovation Lab. The other, I'm taking online calculus-based physics classes from Stanford University. Both are challenging in different ways. Just the other day, I didn't have the schematics and needed to rebuild a carburetor. The research alone took me over 2 hours to complete. I appreciate the student-driven nature of the class, as the goals and curriculum are driven by what each student wants to explore. And in talking to the student about their experience with rebuilding the carburetor, that's extremely complicated work, yet she feels comfortable with the support that she has to be able to do some of that research on her own, but know that she has a teacher there for guidance and support, and she actually did rebuild this carburetor.
What we hope you've seen through this presentation is that students have a variety of pathways to travel through the upper school, and they have many choices that they can make about not only their curriculum, but also about the individual classes that they take throughout their high school career. Thank you for being in this presentation with us today. We are always available to talk to individual students and families about their particular pathways through the upper school and to have those conversations.
Thank you.